Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, we are more than 6 months now into the current administration. There was a lot of promises made when the president was not only running, but on his transition back into the White House, that things were going to significantly change when it came to our inalienable Second Amendment rights, and in particular, our favorite three-letter agency, the ATF. Have things really changed? Well, we're going to go through a bunch of examples, good and bad, and then we're going to leave it all with you because we want to hear from you what you think has happened. So some of you may come at it as a gun store, some of you may come at it as a gun owner, some of you may just come at it as a voter. But today, let's slow it all down and let's talk about, have things really changed at the ATF? Okay, America, we're going to be talking about something that I don't think we're going to be able to come up with truly an objective, aha, here's the answer. We are going to talk about a lot of things that have gone on with the ATF and the Department of Justice and our Second Amendment rights since President Trump reassumed his position in the White House. Now, I do want to start with a disclaimer. I recognize that President Trump can be a very polarizing figure, even in our sphere. And I just want to get a disclosure out, which is I have always been lukewarm on President Trump. Now, have I voted for him? Well, considering the alternatives, yeah, I had no problem voting for him. But I know that some people believe that he is the greatest person to ever walk the face of the earth. I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying I don't necessarily share those views. Do I agree with many of his policies? I agree with many of his policies. Do I agree with all of them? No, I don't. But in preparation for this video, I did go around and talk to several gun stores here in the Seattle area, so take that for what it's worth. But I asked them, could you sense a change? And to a T, each and every one of them did say that almost immediately when he took office, they, from their professional standpoint, believed that there was a much more softening of the approach by the ATF and that things have changed in a positive direction. Now, let's go through all the promises made both during the campaign and once assuming office, and let's take a look at where are we today in August of 2025 as opposed to where we were, let's say, in the middle of the Biden administration. Okay, well, we had an executive order way back on February 7th of 2025, which demanded a report within 30 days from the Attorney General about how we were going to undo all the damage that had been done to our Second Amendment rights. Now, I know the AG asked for an extension, so we'll give her 60 days, but has anyone seen that report yet? I know I haven't. I know that I likely would have done a video on it if there had actually been a written report. So I'm not going to give passing grades to the Attorney General in that regards, but I will point out that many of the things that could have been in the memo, some of the things that we talked about in videos leading up to President Trump reassuming his position in the White House, have in fact been done. The first thing that the FFLs told me about was a program called Demand 2. Now, the way Demand 2 worked is that if ATF or law enforcement called a particular gun store to run a trace, that was automatically considered a ding on that FFL's records, even to the point where USA Today, along with the help of everyone over at Everytown for Gun Safety, outed a bunch of these gun stores as renegade FFL dealers. Now, I want you to understand that simply because a trace is requested on a firearm, it does not at all, in any way, shape, or form, reflect on the FFL themselves. These could be lost firearms. These could be stolen firearms. These could be firearms, in all instances, we know they were sold lawfully, but were sold to perhaps to a person who was irresponsible in the handling of the firearm, and therefore that results in a trace. But for whatever reason, the ATF believed that the mere act of requesting a trace was indicative of the character of that FFL and was systematically putting people on a hit list. That program is no more. No FFL is forced to participate in it, and as a matter of fact, that program no longer exists. The zero tolerance policy. Nothing was more effective at absolutely demolishing the FFL industry than President Biden's zero tolerance policy, where suddenly minor clerical errors of a company that had been in business for 45 years was going to be deemed willful conduct. Now, to let you know just how ridiculous this got in places, there were states during the pandemic that suspended all Department of Motor Vehicle or Department of Licensing actions, which means people couldn't renew their driver's licenses. The governors in those states said, hey, no problem, we'll extend them for a year anyways. But when FFLs were using those expired pieces of identification for firearm purchases, believe it or not, the ATF was viewing that as a violation and moving to revoke licenses. Now, jury's still out on this. The Gun Owners of America is in receipt of an email where a United States attorney has flat out said they are not abandoning this position whatsoever. However, the truth of the matter is that the Department of Justice and ATF announced the repeal of this rule on April 7th of 2025, and that repeal became official on May 6th of 2025. Now, DOJ has announced that many of the FFLs who were suspended during that time for some of these minor clerical errors are in fact eligible to reapply for their licenses. But in many instances, these people are already financially insolvent because of what ATF did to them and incapable of doing so. Now, there's a rumor kicking around right now that the ATF may be drafting a new rule about engaged in business. We will wait and see what happens there. And obviously, if a new rule is kicking around, you guys will be the first to know about it. The pistol brace rule. Oh my goodness. Nothing gave Washington gun law more material to work with than the pistol brace rule. And while ATF did claim that they were going to recall the rule, they've never done so. They don't really need to, however, because every single federal court that ever got a look at it vacated the rule as being well outside the scope of authority that the ATF had. There are ongoing discussions about settling a couple of the last lawsuits that have been kicking around on this. I'm not really sure exactly what settlement could be reached on this. I will tell you that if any of you did in fact apply for amnesty registration, you can remove those items from the NFRTR. There are documents available, applications available on ATF's website that you can download and then file with ATF to remove it. The reason being that these items no longer constitute NFA items and therefore should not be on the NFRTR. Budgeting. Hey, listen, we know the best way to neuter any federal organization is simply by taking away their money. Well, as we know, there was considerable debate about ATF funding during the most recent reconciliation, and the budget as it sits today is going to be $1.2 billion for ATF. Now, that is down, though, from $1.6 billion, which is a 29% reduction of budget for the ATF. And there apparently is going to be up to 500 industry operation investigators, IOIs, up to 500 of them, that will be eliminated due to these budget cuts. Operation Reticent Recall. Forced reset triggers and solvent traps. Okay, this was the biggest boondoggle in the history of the ATF. It was an absolute tremendous waste of resources and ultimately has resulted in a settlement as it relates to the FRTs. The National Association for Gun Rights and Rare Breed Trigger was able to enter into a settlement with the Department of Justice, which I will point out actually requires ATF to return items seized back to their owners if they are legally permitted to do so in their state. So I ask all of you, when was the last time we got a settlement from the ATF where they not only acquiesced to the demands, but actually returned items that they had seized from otherwise lawful and responsible gun owners? But listen, it's not all rosy because there's still the frames and receivers rule. And as we know, that was the subject of the Supreme Court case of Bondi v. Vanderstock. And as we know, the Supreme Court had absolutely no problem upholding that rule. There has been no discussions of a recall of that rule. The rule on frames and receivers is alive and well. What that really means, God only knows, because the rule is as vague as they come. There is somewhere along a spectrum where something goes from raw material to close enough to be in a receiver that it is in fact considered a receiver. And where that line is anybody's guess. But for the foreseeable future, the frames and receiver rule does not appear to be going anywhere. Now, let's also remember that there's been significant changes in leadership at the ATF as well. Kash Patel was named as an interim director. Now Daniel Driscoll is the acting director of the ATF, and that was met with very, very positive reviews. Something that was met with even more positive reviews was the appointment of Robert Leiter as chief counsel for the ATF. And we have seen from the Department of Justice and ATF a significant and seismic shift in their attitude. We have seen them now file an amicus brief in support of the petitioners in Illinois against Illinois' assault weapon ban or the Protect Illinois Communities Act. And we have also seen the Department of Justice weigh in on an amicus brief asking for acceptance of review by the United States Supreme Court in a horribly egregious case out of the state of Hawaii. So yes, we have seen a remarkable and seismic shift in the legal strategies employed by the ATF. So, America, with all of that in mind, I ask you, do you believe that the ATF is in a significantly better position today than it was when President Trump took over? Now, I get that many of you believe that the only proper remedy for the ATF is its complete abolition. I'm not saying that that's a crazy idea. What I am saying, however, is the legal likelihood of that occurring, especially merely through executive order, is next to impossible. So if in fact we are not going to have the legislative will, which we do not, to absolutely abolish the ATF, is the current form of the ATF at least slightly more tolerable than its previous versions? I ask all of you. So we want to hear from all of you. Do you guys think that the Trump administration has done a good job with the ATF? You think they've done a terrible job? Maybe you think they've done some good things, but they still have a long way to go. And yes, I know many of you will be weighing in saying the only solution that I will accept is abolition of the ATF, and you are absolutely entitled to that opinion. I just wouldn't hold your breath. All right, listen, if you got any other questions about this or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. But if you don't, that's okay. That information down there in the description box. If you got an idea for a video we should be doing around here, click on that link right there and tell us all about it. If you want to subscribe to the monthly newsletter, that information is down there in the description box. And then finally, and most importantly, let's everyone remember that part of being a lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.